it's a real pleasure to welcome to the program Chris Hajec, who joins me now, the Director of Litigation at the Immigration Reform Law Institute. Chris, you may not have heard everything I said about the Supreme Court's decision, but help me out with this. The Supreme Court has said you don't get away with demanding a bond hearing as an excuse to not be held as an illegal alien, even if the immigration officers don't pick you up right away after you're released from other custody. Did I get that about right?
Yes, that's absolutely right. And it's, I mean, the statute does, the requirement doesn't give criminal aliens a windfall and allow them to avoid mandatory detention just because there's been, they were detained in a sanctuary city. I mean, it basically, Justice Alito said in his opinion, it's not the law is not a force multiplier for sanctuary policy. It doesn't.
And that's what a lot of the sanctuary cities were trying to use it as.
Yes, I mean they hamper ICE in detaining people by not telling them when they're going to release them, and then they disappear into the community. And somebody like Mayor Schaaf gives a warning, making it even harder. And then they finally catch him, and then he says, "Oh, well, I'm not eligible. I'm exempt from mandatory detention because you didn't apprehend me within 24 hours." I mean, that Congress, Justice Alito said, was well aware of recalcitrant or sanctuary jurisdictions when it passed this law, and it wouldn't have intended that result.
And Chris, the mayor you were referring to, Mayor Schaaf, was the mayor of Oakland, who famously gave a warning to illegal aliens in the city that ICE agents or immigration agents were on the way, and by giving that advance warning allowed either hundreds or thousands of them to escape from the ICE officers.
Yes. Yes, that was something that could land her in hot water, though it hasn't happened yet.
All right. So what happens now that you have this Supreme Court decision from the perspective of the Immigration Law Reform Law Institute? How does this change the status of sanctuary cities and their attempts to aid and abet illegal aliens in staying in this country?
Well, it limits the reach of such laws. It at least means that they're not going to have this force multiplier effect and end up empowering criminal aliens after they've been caught by ICE. But the sanctuary policies remain and still make it hard for ICE to do its job. And for that reason, the reason that they're an interference with the federal program of immigration law enforcement, they're preempted by the immigration laws, and they violate the supremacy clause of the Constitution.
I'm talking to Chris Hajec, who's Director of Litigation at the Immigration Reform Law Institute. So what else can we do? I know that the president, back when he was a candidate, famously said, we're going to cut off the sanctuary cities from federal funds. That hasn't happened to the extent that a lot of us thought it might happen, and I understand now that some of the effect of that may have some unintended consequences as well. I've heard that there are some veterans programs that may actually lose funding because of that cutoff. But what else can we do to shut down these sanctuary cities in their efforts to do this?
Well, to really cut off funds, you'd need Congress. That isn't likely to happen soon. What else we can do is being done by the United States, and it's a lawsuit against California, arguing that it's to strike down its sanctuary law, and it's now before the Ninth Circuit. I saw the oral argument, and I thought the panel of the court conducting the argument missed a crucial point. So I'm not sure how the Ninth Circuit's going to go, but I think it will end up in the Supreme Court. And if the Supreme Court finds that sanctuary policies like California's unconstitutionally interfere with federal immigration law enforcement, then sanctuary policies are dead all over the country, and there won't be any need for Congress.
Now, does that mean if you say they're dead, but what's the enforcement mechanism? Because we've already seen the way that some institutions in this country have acted. I mean, for an example, when the Obama administration advanced a bunch of policies that a lot of us disagreed with under Title IX against universities, after the Trump administration came in and said, we're doing away with that policy, that letter of guidance, a lot of the universities just said, well, we're going to keep on doing it the way we were doing it. We're not going to follow that. What happens if the sanctuary cities say, we don't care what the Supreme Court says. We're going to go ahead and do business the way we've always done business, like San Francisco has, to the detriment of its own American citizens?
Well, the administration would have to sue them and to enforce the Supreme Court's decision. They know that. And I suppose if they had a friendly administration after this one, you might see some of this. I mean, if you had a friendly administration, I mean, look at who the Democrats have. I mean, Beto wants to tear down the wall.
I think half of the candidates have already said they want to do away with ICE, which is all of the interior enforcement, right?
Right. They want to do away with ICE, or they want to weaken it so much that the whole country would be a sanctuary country. It wouldn't really matter. But if Trump's in there or another pro-enforcement administration, they would sue cities or states that had such policies. The idea being that Congress has created a federal right for individual police officers to decide whether they want to cooperate with ICE or not, and usually they do.
Yeah, I can imagine, because I think most of the police officers see that the person they're arresting now, who could be removed from their community altogether and removed from the country, who's a threat to the citizens that they're sworn to protect, it shouldn't matter what the mayor says or what the governor says or what the county administrator says. Those officers should be able to enforce the law in a way that protects their community.
Yes, and the big reason for that, and it's also why we detain and remove criminal aliens who are here legally, is that, police officers know this, that most crime is committed by repeat offenders. So if you get rid of a criminal by removing them from the country, you prevent a whole string of crimes, quite often.
Well, let's hope so. What frustrates most of us, Chris, and I know you deal with this all the time, so maybe you're used to it as director of litigation at IRLI, but it frustrates citizens that they say, this is wrong. We say, yeah, there's a court case on that. Well, when's that going to come to a head? Well, the whole process may take years. I don't think we have years left.
Yes, that's a concern. It's a great thing that Trump has declared a national emergency because things have to happen quickly. And I don't think the courts will allow it. The Supreme Court will allow it to be blocked for very long.
Chris, it's a pleasure to have you on. Keep up the good work at the Immigration Reform Law Institute, and we appreciate your time today, giving us a perspective on today's Supreme Court decision.
Sure, thank you.
You bet. That's Chris Hajec, and you understand the problem. If you live in a bigger city in America, you likely already live in a sanctuary city, and it probably, if you're like me, drives you nuts that your city's officials are using your tax dollars to aid and abet people who are committing crimes in our country. The first crime, of course, is that they're here at all. The second crime is they're working. The third crime is they're identifying themselves illegally, and then you get into the disproportionate amount of criminal activities that illegal aliens are involved in, and then you see why the effect of your city officials, county officials, state officials aiding and abetting criminals is actually dangerous to you and your family. We'll be back in just a moment. We're live at the Hoover Institution celebrating its centennial this year on the Stanford University campus, and you're listening to the Lars Larson Show.